The cameras were barely set up when Shaquille O'Neal leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and said the sentence that would replay on sports networks for weeks. Kobe? Man, he'd be nothing without me. Laughter erupted in the studio. The host chuckled awkwardly. Even the crew behind the lights tried, and failed, not to react. They all assumed Shaq was just being Shaq, loud, playful, larger than life. But the tone was different this time. There was a bite in it, a sting, a weight, and everyone watching live felt it instantly. The comments spread through social media within minutes, fans arguing, analysts speculating, former players whispering to each other. But no one wondered more than the Lakers' locker room, because they knew something the world didn't. Kobe Bryant didn't forget things, and he didn't let disrespect slide, ever. But this story wouldn't unfold the way anyone expected. It began the night before the interview aired, when Shaq and Kobe were scheduled to appear separately for a retrospective special about the three-peat era. Shaq went first. He was in a playful mood, relaxed, nostalgic. Then the host asked a question that shifted the energy instantly. Do you think Kobe could have won without you? Shaq laughed, a deep, rolling laugh that filled the room. Let me tell you something, he said, leaning forward. Kobe was great. Fantastic competitor. But he wasn't winning anything without the big fella. Not a thing. The host raised his eyebrows. Nothing. Nothing. Shaq repeated, louder this time. He needed me. The crew exchanged glances, because they'd filmed enough interviews to recognize when a line wasn't just a joke. Shaq wasn't teasing. He was asserting, declaring, diminishing. And just when the room started to settle, he added the sentence that turned the whole building cold. And don't get it twisted. If he had listened to me more, we'd have 10 rings. But Kobe always wanted to be the man, even when he wasn't. The host opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no follow-up that wouldn't make things worse. Shaq sat back, satisfied. The producers made notes, thrilled with the drama. And somewhere down the hallway, in a private dressing room with the door barely cracked open, someone heard every word. Derek Fisher had arrived early for his segment. He froze, eyes narrowing. Derek had lived through every conflict, every argument, every cold silence between Shaq and Kobe. But they had grown since then. Age had softened the edges. Time had healed the wounds. Or so he thought. Derek's jaw clenched, because he knew exactly how Kobe would react to seeing that clip. He stepped away quietly before anyone noticed he'd overheard. The next morning, the interview aired. Headlines exploded. Every sports show replayed Shaq's words with dramatic slow-motion graphics and exclamatory captions. But while the world debated, Kobe Bryant was silent. Not publicly, not privately. Not even Vanessa could get more than a shrug out of him when she asked if he was okay. Silence from Kobe was never a good sign. Late that night, Kobe arrived at the training facility. Alone, hoodie up, bag slung over his shoulder. He walked past the security guard without a word, past the empty locker room, past the dark weight room, and stepped onto the practice court. The lights flickered on automatically. Hardwood glowed beneath his feet. He dropped his bag, tied his shoes, picked up a ball, and began to shoot. Not fast, not angry, but with the deliberate precision of a man sorting his thoughts one jumper at a time. He stayed there for hours. The janitorial staff came and went. The clock crept past midnight, and still Kobe shot. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Derek Fisher. Asterisk saw the interview. You good? Asterisk Kobe didn't answer. Instead, he dribbled to the elbow, rose, and hit another mid-range jumper. But inside, something different was happening. People expected Kobe to erupt, to fire back, to defend himself with statistics or trophies or resolve. They expected the Black Mamba. But what Kobe felt wasn't anger. It was sadness, not for himself, but for Shaq. Because the world didn't know what Kobe knew, Shaq used laughter the way other people used armor. Whenever he felt insecure, overlooked, or nostalgic for a past he couldn't relive, he joked harder, louder, sharper. And Kobe recognized that pain. He had lived it too. Around 3 a.m., Kobe finally stopped shooting. He sat on the floor, back against the stanchion, breathing steady, staring at the lights above him. For the first time in years, he didn't think about the championships or the arguments or the breakup of their dynasty. He thought about the little moments no one else had seen. Shaq buying suits for rookies who couldn't afford them. Shaq paying for funerals of strangers he'd never met. Shaq sneaking cheeseburgers into the locker room and offering half to Kobe even when they weren't speaking. Shaq pushing him during practice. Shaq hugging him after Game 7. Shaq telling him, years later when no cameras were rolling, "Proud of you, man." Really, Kobe knew something the world refused to believe. Shaq loved him. Deeply, childishly, imperfectly. And people who loved you sometimes hurt you the most, without even realizing it. The next day, Kobe walked into the studio for his own interview. Producers were buzzing. Assistants were whispering. Camera operators were wide-eyed with anticipation. They wanted fireworks. A comeback. A soundbite that would blow the internet apart. They wanted the feud revived. They wanted the Mamba to strike. Kobe sat down in the chair, adjusted the mic, rested his hands in his lap. The host smiled nervously. "Kobe, you saw what Shaq said?" Kobe nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw it." The host inhaled sharply. "Do you want to respond?" The entire studio leaned forward. Kobe took a long breath, looked directly into the camera, and what he said next made the entire arena of public opinion fall silent. "I could sit here and fire back," Kobe said calmly. "I could list stats. I could list games. I could list moments where I carried us, or he carried us. But that's not what this is about." The host blinked, surprised. The producers stiffened. This was not the explosion they were hoping for. Kobe continued, voice steady, almost gentle. "Shaq's the most dominant player I've ever seen. Period. You don't win 3 championships in a row without someone like that. You don't build a dynasty without him." The host hesitated. "So, you disagree with what he said?" Kobe smiled faintly, an expression so controlled it bordered on sad. "I think," he paused. "I think sometimes people say things because they miss a moment in their life. And they want to feel big again. Important again." The room went still. Kobe wasn't insulting Shaq. He was seeing through him. "Shaq and I, we're brothers," he said. "Brothers fight. Brothers say things they don't mean. But brothers also know the truth, even when the world doesn't." He shifted slightly in his chair. "I know what we did together. I know what he did for me. And he knows what I did for him. No interview changes that. No bravado. No insults. No counterattack. Just honesty. Mature. Clear. Unshakable." The host tried again, pushing gently. "But he said you wouldn't have one without him." Kobe nodded. "Maybe I wouldn't have. And maybe he wouldn't have one without me." His eyes softened. "That's how partnerships work." The crew stared. The host opened his mouth, then closed it again. Kobe leaned forward slightly. "Let me tell you something about Shaq that people forget," he said. "When my shoulder was messed up in 2001, he carried the load without complaining. When the media blamed me for everything, he'd call me privately and say, 'Forget them. We know what's real.' And when my daughter was born, he was the first teammate to show up with gifts bigger than she was." Laughter rippled through the studio, but Kobe wasn't done. "He's not talking about basketball," he said softly. "He's talking about legacy. He's talking about how people remember things. And sometimes people get scared that their chapter is fading." The host swallowed. "Are you saying Shaq is scared?" Kobe exhaled slowly. "I'm saying he's human." Silence washed over the room. Because in that single answer, Kobe didn't attack Shaq. He honored him. He understood him. He forgave him. And he reminded the world that greatness is not measured by how loudly you respond, but by how deeply you listen. After the interview ended, Kobe stood up, shook the host's hand, and walked toward the exit. Halfway down the hallway, a massive figure stepped out from around a corner. Shaq. He had watched the interview from a private monitor. His face wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't amused. It was conflicted, vulnerable. He looked at Kobe, then looked down, kicking the floor lightly with his shoe. "You heard what I said," Shaq muttered. "Not a question. A confession." Kobe nodded. Shaq exhaled, shoulders dropping. "I shouldn't have said that." Kobe didn't smile, didn't tease him, didn't weaponize the moment. He just crossed his arms and waited. Shaq's voice cracked. "Sometimes I run my mouth. You know how I am." "Yeah," Kobe said quietly. "I know exactly how you are." Shaq stared at him, unsure whether this conversation was leading toward forgiveness or a fight. Kobe took a step forward, looked him dead in the eye. "Shaq, you were the most unstoppable force I've ever seen. You helped me become who I became. And no interview changes that." Shaq swallowed hard. His voice dropped. "You really believe that?" "I know that," Kobe said. Shaq blinked fast, turning his head slightly the way men do when they don't want tears to gather. Then he chuckled, a low, shaky laugh. "Man, You always were better at talking than people realized. And you were always better at feeling than you wanted people to know, Kobe replied. Shaq stared at him for a long moment, then pulled him into a massive bear hug, lifting Kobe off the ground as if he weighed nothing. I love you, man, Shaq muttered into his shoulder. Even when I act like an idiot. Kobe patted his back firmly. I know. When they separated, Shaq wiped his eyes quickly. Don't tell anybody I cried. Kobe smirked. Too late. Cameras everywhere. Shaq froze, horrified. Kobe broke into a rare, genuine laugh. I'm messing with you, he said. Shaq let out a breath, glaring playfully. Man, don't do that. Stop giving them things to talk about, Kobe shot back. Shaq shook his head, smiling now. You're something else. Kobe's expression softened. So are you. They walked down the hallway together, side by side. Two legends, two giants, two flawed men who had shaped each other in ways the world would never fully understand. And as they reached the exit, Shaq paused. Hey, what you said in the interview. Kobe raised an eyebrow. Which part? Shaq swallowed. All of it. His voice went quiet. Thank you. Kobe nodded once. Anytime. And the door closed behind them. Not on a rivalry, not on a feud, but on two men who finally understood that their legacies were inseparable. Years later, when asked privately about that moment, Kobe would say something no one had ever heard him say publicly. People think Shaq and I were enemies, he said. But the truth is, he was one of the greatest teachers of my life. He paused. Because he taught me what strength really is. The interviewer leaned in. And what's that? Kobe smiled softly. Forgiving someone who doesn't know how to ask for forgiveness. Shaq wasn't the only one changed by what happened that night. Word of Kobe's interview, and the private reconciliation afterward, spread quietly through the Lakers organization. Some heard it from staff members who'd been in the hallway. Others heard it from the host himself, who couldn't stop talking about the way Kobe had handled the moment. But the biggest shift happened the next morning, when Kobe arrived early, long before sunrise, long before anyone else, to get in his usual solo workout. Except someone was already there. Shaq. Sweating. Shooting free throws. Moving with a focus nobody on the team had seen from him in years. Kobe stepped inside the dimly lit practice facility, dribbling a ball lazily at his side. You're early, he said. Shaq didn't turn around. Figure I should act like a professional since someone out there's making me look bad. Kobe smirked. He walked to the opposite basket, started his own routine. For nearly 20 minutes, neither said a word. Just the rhythmic echo of basketballs hitting hardwood, the quiet squeak of shoes, two completely different men speaking the same language. Finally, Shaq caught a rebound, held the ball under his arm, and looked over. You meant what you said, didn't you? Kobe nodded. All of it. Shaq swallowed, then looked away quickly. I don't always know how to express things right. Kobe didn't respond, didn't tease, didn't poke at the vulnerability. He just kept shooting. Shaq continued, voice lower now. But I do know this. You pushed me. Harder than anyone. Harder than any coach. Harder than any teammate. Kobe let the ball bounce to a stop. And you pushed me, he said. In a different way. Shaq exhaled. Yeah, I know. A few minutes of silence passed before Shaq suddenly pointed to the floor. Race you to 21. Kobe's eyebrows lifted. You want to lose today? Shaq grinned. I wouldn't get too confident, little man. Kobe walked to the top of the key, spinning the ball on his finger. Check up then. What followed was one of the most competitive, physical, brutally honest games of one-on-one the Lakers facility had ever seen. No cameras, no reporters, no fans, just two legends working through years of tension, the only way they truly knew how, by competing. Shaq backed Kobe down with force that shook the floor. Kobe responded with footwork so sharp it made even Shaq laugh. Shaq blocked a turnaround jumper into the seats. Kobe stripped him clean on the next possession and drilled a fadeaway three. They trash-talked. They laughed. They grunted through exhaustion. They tested each other. And somewhere in the middle of that game, something shifted. A weight lifted. A fracture healed. When the score hit 20-20, both men paused, hands on their knees, breathing heavily. Last point, Shaq said. Make it count. Kobe took the ball, dribbled slowly. He didn't run a move. Didn't shake or fake. He just stopped at the elbow, rose up, and nailed the jumper. Classic, clean, impossible to defend. Ball game, Kobe whispered. Shaq nodded, smiling through the fatigue. Yeah, that's you. They walked off the court together, neither speaking for a while, until Shaq finally said what had been sitting in his chest for years. "Man, I should have appreciated you more." Kobe didn't look at him. "We both could have done things better." Shaq nodded. "Yeah, but I was older. I should have known better." Kobe's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in empathy. "We were kids," he said quietly. "Kids with too much power and not enough guidance. It happens." Shaq stopped walking. "Still, I owe you one." Kobe shrugged. "Then make me a promise." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "Name it." Kobe looked him dead in the eyes. "No more interviews taking shots. If you've got something to say, call me." Shaq stared at him for a long moment, then extended his huge hand. "Deal." Kobe took it. "Deal." And that handshake, quiet, private, unseen by the world, repaired something neither thought could ever be fixed. In the months that followed, their relationship transformed. Not into a perfect friendship, not into daily phone calls or constant affection. That wasn't who they were. But into respect, into honesty, into a brotherhood built not on championships, but on understanding. Shaq began praising Kobe publicly more than ever before. Not out of obligation, but out of gratitude. Kobe, in turn, defended Shaq whenever critics tried to diminish his career. And when Kobe retired, Shaq sat in the front row, smiling the entire time, as if watching a little brother finally receive the crown he'd always deserved. Years later, after Kobe passed, Shaq would struggle through tears on live television. "We weren't just teammates," he said, voice breaking. "We were brothers. And losing him, it hurts. It really hurts." People saw the pain. They saw the regret. They saw the love. But what they didn't know, what only a handful of people ever witnessed, was the quiet moment years before, in that empty hallway, when two legends dropped their armor, dropped their egos, and finally said the words that healed everything. "I'm sorry. I forgive you. And maybe most importantly, I love you, brother."